Today's daf yomi is Bava Basra daf Mem Zayin Bava Basra 47, and we're going to start on the top of 47a. The Gemara is discussing whether or not certain people can testify on behalf of other people, and in this context, the Gemara says a kablin. Amrulay Mayed, Mayed. Some say a kablin can testify on behalf of the other, and others say he can't. Who's a kablin? A kablin is somebody who's considered, in this case, a guarantor who's a kablin, a guarantor who accepted upon himself that he was going to pay the money that the money that he got from the lender he's going to give to the borrower. As a basic principle is that the kablin is a type of guarantor who allows the people who he guarantees the money for, the lender, to come to him or to go to the borrower at the same time. Meaning he could choose whoever he wants. Usually a guarantor, you go to the borrower first, and if he can't pay, you go back to the lender, to the guarantor. For the kablin, you can go to either one first. So some say that he can testify that this is actually the property of the borrower, and others say he can't testify. Amrulay Mayed, some ones that say he could testify, Ka'arev Dami, because he's like a guarantor, and the guarantor is always allowed to testify for the borrower if the borrower has other property to pay back the lender. Others say no, he can't testify. The nichole don't have it biyade travayu the kiyasabachov my devari shaka, because the guarantor in this case wants the borrower to have more property. This will give the more property he has, the more likely that the lender will go to the borrower and not to the guarantor to accept the money. Okay, so now we say Amar Rabbi Yochanan Uman ein lo chazaka. Rabbi Yochanan taught that an uman, i.e., a person who is a craftsman, let's say a shoemaker, and you have the shoes in his possession, or on 47a, he's not going to have a chazaka, meaning we don't presume that he has it in his possession. Just because he has the shoes doesn't mean it's his. Not like a regular person, if it's your shoes, the presumption is it's yours. We're not going to give that to the craftsman. But Benuman, if it's the son of a craftsman, the son of the shoemaker, yesh lo chazaka. We're going to say the son of the shoemaker, he has shoes. He's got to walking around with the Air Jordans. Only assume that they are his Air Jordans, unless you can prove differently. And ours, so to a sharecropper, ein lo chazaka, the sharecropper, we're not going to assume he has a chazaka, even though, because he's allowed to be in the land. He's supposed to be in the land. So the fact that he's there doesn't mean that he has a presumption that it's his, but the ben aris, but if it's the son of the sharecropper, yesh lo chazaka, then we're going to assume that he in fact has a chazaka. And now we come to the tricky part, Gazlan, a robber, uben Gazlan, ein lan chazaka, a robber and the son of the robber, ein lan chazaka. The robber and the son of the robber, they don't have a chazaka. The robber and the son, not only the robber doesn't have a chazaka, there's a robber, the assumption is that he stole this property, so he's there, he doesn't have a chazaka because we assume he stole it. But also his son there doesn't have a chazaka. Ben benoshal gazlan yesh lo chazaka. But the grandson of the robber, we're going to say he has a chazaka. So Gemara says, well, what are we talking about with the robber? What are we talking about? Also in these cases, with the robber, the son of the robber versus the son of the craftsman and the son of the shoemaker and the son of the sharecropper. If he's saying it's my father, well, then even the shoemaker's kid and the sharecropper's kid, their chazaka shouldn't work. And if they're not coming with the Tanas with the claims that it's their father's, he's just saying it's mine, then I feel Ben Gazo Nami, then even the son of the robber should have a good chazaka. So the Gemara says, no, what we're talking about here is the Ka'ami Adim, the witnesses are saying, listen, in front of us, the person who's making the complaint admitted to us that it's not his. So Hanach Iko Meimer Kushta Ka'amri. So as it relates to the shoemaker, and as it relates to the sharecropper, we say that the person who's making the complaint, the person is telling the truth that it's not his. But in respect to this one, Afagav Da'ode, but with respect to the robber, even though the guy who's making the complaint says it's not his, we're still not going to believe him because because we're going to assume that he was afraid of he's afraid. Like Rav Kahana taught, Amar Rav Kahana, Ilav the Odiway, if he went, if this guy who might have been Israel and not admitted it, he would have given. Oh, it's upstairs. Oh, okay, we're good. Okay, fine. There's a book once. My kid, there's a children's book. You can find the children's book about there's a mosquito that flies into the house, and there's somebody or a fly. They try to kill the fly, and they finally catch the fly, but in the process, they destroy the whole house. So anyway, he says. So he says that you don't believe that because he's saying the only reason why he's admitting that it's not his is because otherwise the robber is going to hand them over to the authorities. Give him over to the authorities. So Rava says sometimes even the grandson of a robber, Nami Elo Chazaka, he also doesn't have Chazaka. How so? What's the scenario? He's saying, listen, it was my grandfather. Well, your grandfather was a robber, so if that's your claim, then you don't have a chazaka. Gemara says, Gazan, what are we talking about when we say the guy is a robber? Where there's an assumption about this, that there's the assumption that he was a robber for this field. Rav Chisda says, no, there isn't. Rav Chisda says, Kigon, the base pony shahargin nefashos, all good? Everybody's in one shape. Nobody got hurt. So Rav Chisda says, "Kigon the base pony shargin nefashos." I always give him my money. So thank you, Meyer. Shkoyach to you. So we're talking about like it doesn't have to be that he's goblin in this specific field, but we're talking about base pony shargin nefashos. I always give my money. It's like a mafia family that they know they kill people for this specific for money, so therefore we don't trust that this guy's his field. Tan Rabbanon Uman ein lo chazaka. If he's a craftsman, he has no chazaka. But Yard Milam Nuso, but let's say he's no longer the shoemaker, and now he has shoes in his possession that he got after he stopped being a shoemaker. Then yesh lo chazaka. Then we're going to say he can have a chazaka. Ares ein lo chazaka. Yard Meiriso yesh lo chazaka. If he's a sharecropper, he has no chazaka. But once he stops being a sharecropper, then he'll have a chazaka. Ben chalak. The Isha Sheniskarisha. So let's say you have a son who stopped being living on his father's property. So we had said in our Mishnah that if there is if there's a son with his father's property, we're going to say that the assumption is that the son can't establish a chazaka with his father's property because presumably the father would let the son use it. So once the son goes out on his own and then he has the father's property, then he can establish a chazaka. If you have a woman, again, a wife, while she's in her husband's property, she can't establish a chazaka because presumably he wants her to use his property. But once she gets divorced, then she's like everybody else and she's able to establish a chazaka. So the Gemara says, Bishlama makes sense, a ben shachalak. It makes sense if it's the son who moves off the father's property. It's trich. Then we're going to say, we need to teach the law that he can establish a chazaka, because he might have thought that the father waived his rights, even though the son no longer depends on his property. So Kamash Mandalo. So we see from here that he hasn't waived it. Now, but if it's a woman who's divorced, it's obviously the case that she establishes a chazaka because her husband doesn't want to give her. Her ex-husband doesn't want her to have his property. So the Gemara says, no. What we're talking about here is we're on top of 47b. We're not sure if she's divorced, meaning to say he's a it's a questionable situation if she's divorced. Because how can it be a questionable divorce? If he throws the divorce towards her, and we're not sure if it got closer to her, in which case we'll get divorced, or it's closer to him, in which case she's not divorced. Look at Rabbi Zer. Rabbi Zer, Rabbi Yerim Barabba says, Amar Shmuel, Kol Makom Shamar Chachamim Megreshes, and we learned that anytime we're not sure if she's divorced, the husband has to support her. So we might have thought, well, since he has to support her, he doesn't care that she's using his property. So we say no, that he does care, and therefore she has a chazaka if she's using it. Rav Nachman said that Rav Huna, but he calls him his Huna because he's his chavrusa. He says, Kuan Sheviu Raya da Asian Riyasan Raya Umamidan Sada Biyada. That all these cases, like the son of the sharecropper, the son of the all these cases of our Mishnah, like the sharecropper, the partners, the husband, the wife, and the son, if they bring a proof that it's theirs, then it's a valid proof. Umamidan Sada Biyadan, and we'll establish that the field is theirs. But Gazlon Shevi Raya, but if you have a robber who brings a proof, a Raya. But if the robber brings a proof, and what's the proof that we're talking about here? That there are witnesses to the sale or to a contract. So then we're going to say it's a valid proof. But if a robber brings a proof, then that the person who sold it admits that he sold it to him, that is not a valid proof because we're going to say he did it out of a fear. So Gemara says, "My kamashmon, what's the proof for this? Tanino lakach mi sikrako. And you take it, you buy it from the mafia. Chazer lakach mi balabayas mekachobato. If you bought it from sikrikon and then you bought it from the balabayas, sikrikon is the mafia. So like a murderer, an idolater is a murderer, and then you bought it from the balabayas. It's a nullified sale. So why do you have to tell us this? So Gemara says, "Lafuke de Rav." It's coming to exclude the position of Rav, who says, "Lo shanu al da amalei chazek v'kanei." He says, when is it disqualified? When the just guy says it verbally, well, b'shtar kana, but with a contract, it's a valid acquisition. Kamash Shmuel, Kiddush Shmuel. So we say we don't say like that. We say like Shmuel, who says af b'shtar namil kana, that even if he has a contract, it's not valid. Unless he writes in the shtar, not only am I selling this to you, but I'm also guaranteeing it. If somebody else takes it, I'll have to pay, because that's not something that the idolater would have been strict to include. Rav Bibi Misayim Bar Mishmein Rav Nachman. Rav Bibi said in the name of Rav Nachman that after he brought this position of Rav Huna, who says their proof is a proof except with a respect to a robber, Karka Ingo, that the robber will not get the real estate that he brought proof that he sold it. However, Aval Maos Yeshlo, but the money that the Ma'ar gave him, that he gave to the Ma'ar Yeshlo, meaning to say he's going to get his money back. And the Ma'ar, if we're going to disqualify the sale because he's a robber, then he'll be able to get his money back. But when do we say that he has to return the money? Sha'amru edim b'fanenu manuo, so that the witnesses said that the robber counted the money to him in front of us. But if the witnesses say, no, he just admitted it, the guy who's selling admitted to us in front of the robber that he sold it, then we're not going to give him back, because we're going to say he's lying about the money also. Said if he wouldn't admit it, he's going to turn him over to the rulers. I mean, say he only did it out of fear. And now we have a very controversial idea. Amar Rav Yehuna, tell you of a zabin. If they force the guy to make a sale, and say we're going to force you to make a sale, we're going to beat you up, or we're going to pressure you until you do the sale. Zabine zavine, it's a valid sale. My time. And what's the reason why it's a valid sale? Because we say call them a zabin inish. So the Gemara's first explanation to why it's a valid sale is because we say anything that a person sells, if he wouldn't be forced, he wouldn't sell it. It means the first approach of the Gemara is you never want to sell something So anytime you're selling something ever, you're always selling it under duress. So even though he's selling it under duress here, it's really just a shade of a degree more than he does every other sale. And so therefore, if he sells it under duress, we're going to say it's a valid sale. Because that's all sales. Really, nobody wants to sell it. The Gemara says, no. No, in this case, it's a different duress. His life is at the rest. I'm not saying he's just gonna he just can't afford to buy his lunch or dinner for tomorrow. We're talking about a case his life is in danger. So you can't compare the duresses. So the Gemara says, okay, so why is it a sale under duress of valid sale? So we say with respect to it says in Vayikra chapter 1, verse 3, Yakrivo so that he should bring a carbon. Malamich a kofano so this proves that we can force the person to bring his vow that it says he made a vow that he's going to bring a male carbon as an offering. And it says in the verse, Yakrivenu al petach moed where it's Hashem. It says he shall bring it. This teaches us. It already says Yakrivenu, so the words Yakrivo to are extra. So it teaches us that we force him to bring the vow. I might think that he's forcing him against his will. No, he has to do it willingly. How so? Okay, it's that that you force him to do it until he says, I want to actually do it. So we see from here that once he's forced to, if in the end he says he wants to, it means he really wanted to do it. The Gemara says, we'll find the proof of that. Also, maybe that case is different. Because there it's to get an atonement, not to sell his property, it's to get a kapara from Hashem. And so once he says, I want to do it, we assume that in his heart he wants to do it. So the Gemara says, Seifa. So it's from the concluding clause of that price. Where it says, also by a get of a divorce, we force him to do it until he says he wants to do it. So just like there, that just one person, and there it's not a kapara, it's not an atonement, he's doing it willingly. So too over here, even though it's not a kapara, we say he's doing it willingly and he really wants to make this sale. The Gemara says, what are you talking about? Maybe that case is different. Because he wants to really divorce his wife, because he wants to do the mitzvah of listening to the sages, and the sages told him to divorce his wife. So we say he wants to do the right thing. So that's the reason why he's doing it. It's unlike here, it's just a sale. So then what's the reason why if you force him to do a sale, it's a valid sale? Says the Gemara, Elasvaro. This is the maskana of the Gemara. What's the svara? It's logical. Agavunse, because the guy's beating him up, Gamaro Makdeng. He decides, he changed his mind and wants to do it. Meaning to say, because he's beating him up, and he says, you know what, I want to sell it. So that's a little bit of a difficult logic, but that is in fact the Gemara's maskana. And in the end, the sale is a valid sale. And so, because in the end, he really does want to sell it, even though it seems like he did it. So I'm guessing that American law will be slightly different on this case, but again, I don't know the law. All right, we'll stop here. Shkoyach to everybody.